Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be the third part of my Within the Ring of Fire saga review. Now, these are probably going to be pretty extensive videos, so I'm just going to go along through the book and see what pops out at me, and I'll just explain that stuff to you as best I can and see where it goes from there. So to start off, we're going to start with Chapter 3. This is Catalyst or Character Creation. Again, Andrew uses different words for things that are pretty standard in other RPGs, but he does his own little thing. I love the tree stump image on page 62. There's this image of this stump, and there's this little candle lit at the very base of it, like inside it. And that in itself, it seems like inspiration for a good encounter or something that you come across in the center of the woods. Like, who put the candle there? Why is it there? Is this some ritual? Is this some like shrine to some nature deity? So, but that was pretty cool. As far as the actual character creation go, some of the stuff that's in there talks about like warnings against power gaming, which is interesting because there's a lot of power gaming videos going around on YouTube right now, and basically just giving the flame tender or game master the final approval on any character. So, there's that ability for the flame tender to say no, you need to revise that, or that's too much, or whatever the case is for whatever chronicle or campaign they're trying to run. The dice mechanics are 2d8, and the higher you roll, the better. When you roll an 8, it explodes, and you add that total to the total that you rolled before. So, there's a lot of exploding dice games out there, and this is another one. If you roll a 1 and an 8, however, this is called a suppress, and the 8 does not explode, and the 1 is considered a 0, so you actually just rolled an 8. If you roll two ones, it's a critical failure, and something bad happens. So, like botches in White Wolf or World of Darkness, something like that. Character sheet, again, the characters are called catalysts. Some of the things that are on there. Schema is a basic, just like brief description of your character concept. Frailty is the weakness of your character, and there are some listed weaknesses or things that you could do. Mostly this is for getting XP for role playing those weaknesses. So you're not limited by any set list. It's just if you can think of a weakness of any character in any sort of fiction, novel, movie that you've ever thought of, or one that you come up of by yourself, you can role play that out. Status is the character's personal power and potency, and this ranges from 0 to 10. And status is another name for like level, like character level in other games. Experience to gain status is a bit complicated at first glance, so it's one of those things you need to think about. I had to read over it twice to sort of get the gist of it. Each character status level is divided into 5 parts. And so you basically like you start out at level status 0, and then you go to like 0/1, 0/2, 0/3, 0/4, and then when you get to 0/5, you gain one status. So you go from status 0 to 1. To get from like 0/1, you need 20 XP. So you basically just slowly you get like a fifth of your level or a fifth of that status, and there's XP totals for those fifths. The stat points are given out when you reach the next full status. So when you go from like 0 to 1, the skill ranks and advantage points are divided by 5, so you get those a little bit at a time. So it kind of feels organic. You get a little bit of things to improve your character with as you go, or you can save them up and blow them in one big thing if you want. So that's kind of neat. It kind of reminded me of like systems where you gain like BRP, where your skills improve a little bit after you get like check marks and things. So not the same, but you slowly get better. Your character improves, and at the full status, you get like stat bonus points. Um, so also when you get to the next full status, so like when you go from 0 to 1, you subtract all the XP that you have acquired, and make sure you don't do this at the fifths. So this is just when you go from a full status of 0 to like 1 or 1 to 2. So what this does is like at status 1 you need to get to 100 XP. So when you get to status 1, you erase all the XP off your sheet and you start at 0 again. And then you need to get from 0 to 150 to get to status number 2. So instead of like in AD&D where you have just like lists of really high experience points and like you need to get this level, this level, this level, it's just a different way of doing it. So once you get past that, it's not a big deal. There is a suggestion for the Flame Tender or the GM to give out individual XP so the characters advance at different rates. And in the past, I guess I've been sort of You know, you can call me like a dirty hippie sort of thing, where I think everyone should be giving out the same XP rates. I have never really done this myself, but Anders says that this creates a spirit of competition at the table. Now, RPGs and competition don't really seem to go hand in hand in my mind in a lot of ways, but I'd be interested to try this to see if it actually works. Because I do know that competition, especially like businesses and things, can bring prices down, motivate people to work a little bit harder. So I don't know. I think, Andrew, you might be changing my mind on the individual experience. So that's good. Different categories of XP awards. There's a bunch of them. There's role playing, playing out your character's frailty or weakness, like a flaw. Sorry for the, the cuckoo clock. Player descriptions, giving the flame tender energy, like making the game fun for the GM. Votes for the best player. That's all the players around are going to give that vote. New experiences, like first time things that your character has gone through, like the first time you meet another species, first time you're hit with an axe, whatever it is. And what I like about this is that it makes the players kind of keep tabs on what's happening to their character. They can write things down, take little notes, and at the end of the session, like, yeah, well, this is the first time this ever happened to me. So it sort of recalls that the things that happened during the session and gets the players thinking about them, which can never be a bad thing. XP for encounters, player created plot hooks, completing goals, and showing up. that's always the important one, is showing up. So a good go on there. I love the page. On page 71, there is an illustration that is it's just really evocative. If I can figure out how this works here. There in this section there isn't a lot of art, but on page 71 there's sort of like creepy woods, swamp almost, and at the end in the distance is this hut with just this one small lighted window. And again, it's another illustration that just makes you think that could be an encounter in a campaign. So props to the artist on that one. On the character sheet, there is image, and that's basically just what your character looks like. Religion is what they follow, the sect, the god, heresy, etc. Another thing that's interesting that I haven't really seen a lot in other RPGs is birthday. The cycles of the year, or instead of a year, it's a cycle, is 77 days. And you pick one of those 77 days, and one of those days is associated with each of the gods. So, you need to ask also what cycle the Flame Tenor is running his campaign in. But that is an interesting aspect that, again, I don't think I've ever written down birthday on any of my character sheets. So props to Andrew for that. Stats, they're capped at 12, so that's the highest you can ever have, except there are exceptions when modified by the species stat bonus. So if your species normally gives you a +1, then your max stat cap would be 13. And the stat ratings, or like stat modifiers in other systems, are basically determined by subtracting 8 from your stat. So if you have a 9, you would have a +1 bonus, and those are used to add to your skill rolls. The skill or the stats are pretty straightforward. They are they remind me of like the D&D stats: strength, dexterity, vigor, or like constitution in D&D, intelligence, enlightenment, like wisdom in D&D, and presence, like charisma in D&D. So you have the 6 stats there, and there are some derived stats based on them. But just one thing I found interesting is uh, Ander put in there for strength body slam rating. So again, Ander has this thing with wrestling. That's fun. That's what he likes to do. It makes his videos very fun to watch. So I thought that was cool that he put some wrestling stuff in there. But body slam could be lifting, pulling, and there's information on doing different things. There are 61 stat points, and you get more at higher levels, and you get to put these into your stats. So it's basically just like a point buy system. And Ander talks about power gaming, and I myself find that point buy systems are usually the systems that power gamers usually go towards. So there's lots of warnings in there, and please don't do this. Please don't max out these stats. Try to make them normal characters. Try to have them with flaws. So again, the Flame Tender has to keep an eye on that. Derived stats, health gauge, are basically like hit points in D&D to a limited degree. They're basically just added up with like vigor, forte, strength, conditioning, which I guess is skill, and your status. You gain 1 per status gained. The quick, this is interesting, is it kind of reminds me of White Wolf with the health levels. When you get down to 7 health gauge, you start taking penalties to your skills. So when you get down to like a 1, you would have a -7 to all skill rolls. So it's -1 for 7 and under. There is reaction enlightenment, or I'm sorry, reaction is enlightenment plus insight, and a species bonus, and that's basically just initiative. So if you think reaction, initiative, you'll pretty much get the gist there. Defense is cool because you roll defense, and then the attacker rolls attack, and whoever gets higher, if the attacker rolls higher than your rolled amount, then he basically hits you. So combat feels a little bit more dynamic. I believe it was the Game of Thrones D20 game that suggested doing the same thing, and I always thought that was cool. I've always wanted to try that out instead of like having a static defense bonus. But you also have a static defense bonus, and that is if you basically can't roll anymore. You have a defense capacity, and that's 3 plus enlightenment, and that's the number of times you can roll defense in a round. So if you get surrounded and they're attacking you more than you can block, they just try to get your static defense, which is like dex plus evade and a shield bonus minus armor penalty. So yeah, so if you get surrounded, that's not a good thing for you. Armor rating is like hide plus your armor bonus. Attack is dex plus grades that you have in your weapon, and fortes. We'll get to fortes later. Speed is like dex and vigor and athletics running, plus your species bonus. And you get advantages. Those are like 5 points, and you get 5 more with each status rank. You basically can get more of these as well with buying, well, I guess not buying, but taking imperfections, and these are like flaws. So you have advantages and imperfections, and you try to, sort of balance them out. And I think imperfections are always fun to throw in a game. Again, this could be another tool for power gamers to use, so you have to watch that as a flame tender. There are skill grades, and you get skill points basically every level, every status level, and they're maxed out at 5 at first level, but then they increase 1 for every status that you gain. And you also start with 3 fortes, which are kind of like I think specialties of the skills. Passions, you have 5 points, and you spend them between love, hate, and piety, and their ratings go from 0 to 15, and these can only be increased via role playing. So the flame tender would reward points in this based on how the characters play, or how the players play their characters. And they can also be lowered. So if someone is like not really playing up to those, or if their hate was high and now they're more forgiving, then it will lower as well. Opulence is basically a rating of wealth. It goes from 0 to 15, with like 0 being the beggar and 15 being the richest person in the world. Possessions, there's sort of like a loose do what is reasonable for your background and character concept here. So a lot of give and take, I think, on what you actually have. So less of keeping long lists of candles times 5 and that kind of stuff. So just sort of a loose take on the stuff that you have in your character sheet. So that is pretty much chapter 3. I think I'm going to stop there and head on to the next video, and I'll talk to you later.